Beyond the Gate spoilers on Tuesday, September 9th, reveal that Chelsea Hamilton has an uphill battle ahead of her, while Tomas Navarro faces a dilemma to resolve. Chelsea was found one gloomy morning after days of captivity, her body shaking, her hands covered in scratches, and her eyes lacking the bright confidence that had once been her trademark. Despite the efforts of her loved ones to save her from Allison's brutal grasp, none of them could save her from the haunting echoes that still resonate in her mind. For Chelsea, captivity was not just about the physical, but about the breaking down of layers of trust, the loss of control, and the terror of realizing that she could be replaced, manipulated, and suffocated by someone who had once come into her life with admiration. As news of the kidnapping spread, sensational headlines, side-view photos of her face as she was rescued, all of them were like knives cutting into her unhealed psychological wounds. Social media, once a brilliant stage for Chelsea to assert her brand and personality, now became a place to expose her vulnerability, where she was looked at with pity or worse, suspicion. There were posts suggesting that the kidnapping was just a PR stunt. There were cruel comments discussing whether she was still creative after the incident. That, combined with physical exhaustion, pushed Chelsea deeper and deeper into the darkness that no one could reach. Anita and Vernon watched her every move, the long silences, the blank stares, and the nights she cried silently in her room. Even as a mother who had experienced so much pain, Anita still felt helpless in the face of her daughter's broken spirit. Vernon, a veteran politician, no longer offers the same strong advice as before, but instead a quiet and patient presence. They don't know when Chelsea will get over it or even if she wants to. While everyone focuses on Chelsea, another undercurrent is forming, originating from Naomi's heart. Chelsea's disappearance has brought Bill and Dany closer. They were once unfinished pieces, once attached and then separated because of wrong choices. But when faced with the fear of losing their child, they find harmony in panic and fragile hope. Every shared glance, every accidental touch, every word of comfort, all accumulate like an underground stream, smoldering but strong, leading to the moment Naomi accidentally catches them in the hospital hallway, where the yellow light shines through the glass window, illuminating a long, wordless hug. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a gesture of sympathy, but to Naomi, who had lived through her father's emotional instability, who had seen Dany cause the family's demise, it was a shock. She stood there, her heart in her throat, feeling betrayed by both her father and the man she had tried to forgive. Naomi couldn't tell if it was a hug of comfort or the end of a broken relationship. She wasn't sure if she was overreacting or if it was her abandoned child instincts speaking up. The lingering hurt from the past rose up, as if all her efforts to maintain maturity and composure had collapsed in an instant. Naomi didn't say a word of reproach, but the look in her eyes as she left, bitter and hurt, left Bill speechless. He understood that there were cracks that couldn't be mended with explanations. He couldn't deny the feelings he felt for Dany, but he couldn't help but feel like a jerk in front of his daughter. Dany was caught between two waves, one of resurrected emotions and the other of maternal responsibility. She knew her every move would be scrutinized, especially when her daughter was still struggling with the trauma. Dany didn't actively seek love from Bill, but the empathy, the quiet sharing between them was something she hadn't had in a long time. She wasn't sure if it was old feelings returning, or just two lonely souls finding some warmth in the storm. As Chelsea began therapy with a therapist, repressed memories began to surface. She remembered Allison's frantic gaze, the nightly whispers that she was worthless, that the world loved her shell, not who she really was. The fear of abandonment, of being replaced, of being forgotten, all like nightmares she couldn't escape. Chelsea used to control every aspect of her image, but now she stood in front of the mirror and couldn't recognize herself. She didn't want to see the pity in the eyes of those who loved her, nor did she want to face the expectation that she had to come back stronger. She just wanted to be weak, to fall apart, to be quiet for a while to find her true meaning. Meanwhile, Tomas was going through another internal struggle. Although he was not the one who directly saved Chelsea, he was the one who had been close to Allison, the one who had tried to warn her but was ignored, and now carried a deep burden of guilt. He wanted to see Chelsea, wanted to apologize, wanted to say something to soothe her, but also understood that his presence could be a stimulant that would deepen her wounds. Tomas quietly tried to help from afar, contacting doctors, arranging for a rehabilitation specialist, asking someone to protect Chelsea's personal information from the media. He stood in the shadows like an invisible guardian, not daring to ask for forgiveness, only hoping to make amends in the least painful way. The coming days at Fairmont Crest were not peaceful. Each character had their own wound, an unmade decision, an unnamed emotion. Chelsea was on the edge between recovery and collapse. Naomi was faced with the choice between forgiveness and resistance. Bill and Dany are confronting their own hearts and the consequences of every touch. Tomas struggles with guilt, and all of them, no matter which side of the emotional spectrum they fall on, are bound by invisible strings from the past, from bad choices, and from love and hurt that never quite heals. Leslie walked out of the gates of Ted's mansion in a state of near shock, not only from the elaborate betrayal but also from the sense that she had been stripped of all her defenses and humiliated. For weeks, she had harbored hopes that she could start a new chapter in the mansion that had once been Ted and Nicole's home, now promised to give back to her as a sign of repentance and redemption. It was not just a piece of real estate, but a symbol of recognition, a key to an independent future, free from the darkness of her hurtful past. But it was all a power play. When Ted blithely admitted that all the promises were a strategy to prevent her from buying the house across the street from Vernon and Anita, Leslie realized that she was not only not considered a worthy person, but also a pawn to be moved by pride and arbitrary control. The humiliation was seared into her mind, making Leslie feel like she was reliving a cycle of emotional abuse, but this time not by a lover, but by the man she had thought was her savior. In the shadow of the upper-class world of Fairmont Crest, Eva stood by her window, watching Leslie leave the mansion like a shadow. She didn't need to ask what had happened. She knew, because she had been the one who had initiated the whole scheme. It was Eva who had asked Ted to find a way to keep Leslie from interfering in the Dupree heartland. But the way he had acted sent a chill down Eva's spine. For Eva, control was an art, refined with words, looks, and subtle influence, not with humiliation. Ted's revealing his true intentions to Leslie was like poking at a raw scar on the young woman's soul, accustomed to being despised by both her family and society. Eva felt betrayed, but also a victim of a plan she thought she could control. The situation aroused a strange feeling in Eva, anger towards Ted, but also deep sympathy and empathy for Leslie, feelings she had never allowed herself to touch before. In the midst of her inner conflict, Eva made a bold decision: invite Leslie to her house and talk frankly. Not to apologize, but to create a chance to make amends. That's when Eva proposed the idea of getting Tomas to intervene legally, not only to sue Ted for false promises, but also to create a precedent that those in power cannot forever manipulate others' emotions without paying the price. However, the plan was not simple. Tomas was not a pawn that could be easily controlled. He is a lawyer who has represented many of the Dupree clan and is closely associated with Bill, the man who is now his boss and the father of Kat, the woman with whom Tomas is slowly rebuilding trust after a series of misunderstandings and breakups. Taking sides with Eva and Leslie, while legally justified, is politically and emotionally risky, especially when it could be interpreted as an open attack on Vernon and Anita, the grandparents of his children. Tomas knows that the power ecosystem at Fairmont Crest operates not according to the law, but according to the unspoken agreements of honor, influence, and family alliances. Every move must be weighed not just in terms of reason but also in terms of loyalty. But Leslie is not someone whose trust, once rekindled, is not easily extinguished. She enters Tomas's office with not only hope for help, but also pent-up anger from years of manipulation. She's not asking for pity, she's asking for justice. And that awakens a deep part of Tomas that's been pushed aside for fear of repercussions. While Kat's emotions and responsibilities are still fraught, Tomas feels that for the first time in months, he's free to act without asking anyone's permission. But what complicates things is Eva. She appears calm and rational, but she's hiding an agenda that no one understands. She doesn't simply want to help Leslie. She wants to set a precedent that will make it impossible for the Dupree family to continue to manipulate the lives of those they once considered outsiders. Supporting Leslie may be part of a larger plan to restructure power, break up monopolies, and perhaps pave the way for a new generation to rise from the ashes of family secrets. Eva knows that if she can convince Tomas to join her, the dynamics at Fairmont Crest will change forever. But is she truly willing to protect Leslie, or is she exploiting her vulnerability for her own ends? Only Eva knows that question, and she may not be ready to face the answer. Naomi has always tried to be strong, rational, and in control of her emotions. But deep inside, she is a child who still has unhealed wounds from witnessing Dany destroy her family. She once accepted that her parents could not come back, tried to forgive past mistakes, built a calm shell to avoid being hurt again. But everything collapsed the moment she saw Bill and Dany, the two people who had hurt her the most, now laughing and talking intimately, their eyes meeting no longer with distance but with nostalgic closeness. For Naomi, that intimacy was not simply a gesture of sympathy between people who were worried about Chelsea, but a quiet but clear reunion. It awakened all the suppressed wounds, making her feel like she was being excluded from her own family. The anger comes not only from feelings of betrayal, but also from the fear of losing status, losing control, and most of all, losing her role as the only child who understands and protects Bill from Dany's conflicting influences. Naomi has never felt good enough in her mother's eyes. Dany loves Chelsea in a way Naomi never did. Bill's return to the emotional whirlwind with Dany makes her feel like she's been pushed aside again. She can't tell whether she's jealous of Chelsea, hurt by Dany, or angry at Bill. It all blends into one blind rage, causing her to blurt out that Dany is a pity seeker, someone who has returned only to regain power in the family under the guise of maternal love. It's that accusation that could be the catalyst that pushes Naomi and Dany's already fragile relationship to the brink of collapse. Dany can endure, she can take the hurt, but she can't stay in a relationship where her every move is interpreted negatively. Naomi, heartbroken as she is, can't help but believe that her mother just wants to control everything again, including Bill. But what Naomi doesn't realize is that she's just as obsessed with the concept of power, status, and influence as Dany was. Meanwhile, Haley is watching the action with the sharp eyes of a woman who understands that time and affection are the two hardest things to maintain. Bill's moment of weakness with Dany, whether it's due to circumstances or genuine feelings or is inevitable. Haley knows full well that she has no blood connection to Bill or Chelsea, and the only thing keeping her in the position of partner is the perfect image she's built up. But that image is shaken when Dany appears as the suffering mother companion, and Bill slowly regains his trust. Haley begins to think, as she has many times in the past, about ways to cling to power. The fake pregnancy she once had to make Bill feel responsible might be an option to return. She doesn't want a real child. She wants an irrevocable bond that will force Dany to retreat and keep Bill from walking away. As the emotional intrigues of the Hamilton-Dupree household weave, Chelsea is struggling with her own. The physical wounds are healing, but the emotional scars are growing. She finds herself caught between conflicting emotions from her parents. Dany wants to hold her tight, Haley wants to regain control, Bill tries to keep things in balance. But Chelsea, once able to build a personal brand despite the chaos, now feels like a pawn in a much larger game. She doesn't know whose side to take, because all three make her feel both grateful and suffocated. For the first time, Chelsea begins to seriously consider leaving Fairmont Crest, starting over where no one knows who she is. No one tries to define her as someone's daughter or someone's victim. That decision, if it works, would be a complete break from the emotional chains that Chelsea has been trapped in since birth. On the other side, Tomas begins to face the biggest conflict of his career and personal life. When he agrees to help Leslie and Eva, he initially thinks he is on the side of justice. But he soon realizes that every legal action in this world sets off a chain reaction that spirals out of control. As news of the lawsuit against Ted spreads internally, Bill's gaze shifts from trust to suspicion. Tomas is a loyal employee, but also the boyfriend of Vernon and Anita's daughter, Kat. The lawsuit, if successful, would set a precedent that the Dupree power could be challenged publicly, something that has never happened before. Tomas wasn't afraid of losing his job, but he was afraid of losing Kat. And that made him wonder every time he submitted a document, every time he signed a document, whether he was doing the right thing or just betraying all those who trusted him. Kat was completely surprised to discover that Tomas was on Eva and Leslie's side. For her, it was not just a matter of career but of family honor. Everything Vernon, Anita, Bill, and herself had held dear could be destroyed if Tomas went any further. She did not say it right away, but the distance between them gradually grew. Kat's eyes were no longer filled with trust, but instead with caution, with hurt. Kat loved Tomas, but she also understood that he was no longer the one willing to sacrifice everything to protect her like before. If the lawsuit became a public symbol of challenging the Dupree empire, Tomas would be the flag bearer, and Kat was forced to ask, can their love survive when one chooses justice, while the other is dragged into the vortex of family honor? Tomas did not want to choose between Kat and Eva, but events were pushing him to that crossroads. The deeper he digs, the more he finds himself caught between two worlds, one between the power structure that has fueled his career, and the other between people who yearn for justice and liberation. He begins to realize that, despite his pure intentions, he is unwittingly at the center of a war that is not just legal, but a cold war between families, classes, and generations. A war where every look, every handshake is filled with intrigue and broken trust. He doesn't know if he can save his love for Kat, or if he will have to risk everything. His love, his career, his credibility, to do what he believes is right. But what Tomas, Kat, Naomi, Chelsea, Haley, Dany, Eva, and Leslie don't realize is that every small action they take in the present is silently reshaping the power structure at Fairmont Crest. Personal confrontations, emotional disputes, seemingly private lawsuits, all are intertwined, fueling a wave of change that could see the family structure collapse or be reborn in ways no one could have imagined. And once again, all eyes will be on those who have been silent, those who have been seen as underdogs, for they could be the ones to change the game forever.